Hey guys, so I think I'm going to do an update on kind of where I've been. But before I do that, I want to give an overview of my life since Dragon Ball. I worked at Faulconer Productions Music, or Cake Mix Recording, which is the actual studio. I was hired in summer of 1999, and I worked until December of 2000. And very soon I kind of falling out. And at that point, I was interested in getting into the game industry and spent some time working up interactive music demos. There's another video called Demo that landed me the Empire's gig. It'll fill you more in what I was doing at that time, but I made this demo and I took it to a game developer conference, and that's actually a different demo than the one that's in that video. There's an earlier interactive music demo. Anyway, and that demo got me an interview at LucasArts, where they flew me down. I was one of 11 people they were considering to be the lead composer at LucasArts. And then I also got in contact with Microsoft about testing the software that I used to make that interactive music demo, which is called DirectMusic. I didn't get hired by LucasArts because I didn't have enough experience in the industry to kind of take on a big position like that yet. But I did move to Washington State to work for Microsoft, or at least as a contractor at first, doing testing on their interactive music software called DirectMusic. And I spent like 2.5 years on and off doing contracting work, working on kind of Windows audio technologies and the DirectMusic stuff. After my first contract with Microsoft is when I did the score for Empire's Dawn of the Modern World, which used that same technology, and it was through connections I made at Microsoft that I knew about that job opportunity, and I had a lot of experience with it, so I was able to, put together a demo pretty quickly. Another thing that helped was I was a programmer, so I'm a programmer, so I was able to make something that looked pretty snazzy compared to probably all the other applicants. I made kind of some more attempts to become a full-fledged composer in the game industry, and I got hooked up with Bob Rice, who's pretty much the biggest game music agent out there. But I wasn't willing to just drop my work because I had a daughter by then. My daughter was born in 2002, which is not long after I got to Washington. So I needed to support my family, and Bob wasn't cool with me taking a contract doing work for Microsoft while he was hunting for game scoring jobs for me. So that didn't really pan out, even though it was a go. He wanted to work with me, he liked my stuff, he just didn't like the situation. So yeah, after that I kind of just started, instead of focusing on trying to get hired by game companies, which is the reason I created Morgan Studios in the first place. Morgan Studios was never meant to be, an entity that makes albums for just general people to consume and buy and listen to. It was more of a company name to attract video game companies' attention. And then, so about 2004, I started to give up on that, and just like I made my new demos in that year to kind of update my sound, in addition to the interactive stuff I had done. And so then, I just started working on an album, just to make the album that I always wanted to do, which is kind of this metal, orchestral, electronic music mix. That's when I've applied for a different position at Microsoft, because before I'd just been like a hands-on tester kind of guy, running their software and kind of making sure that things worked. And they had another position available, working as a guy who writes test automation. So this is an actual programmer job. You're still doing test work. So I was using like C#, C++, and things like that to make tests that would automatically run, and then you could look at the log results and see, if the software was doing what it should have done. After I got hired full-time by Microsoft, I spent nearly 10 years working at doing that kind of work. It was a real nice job. What paid way better than any music job that I ever had. Actually, probably one of the lowest paying jobs I ever had was working on Dragon Ball Z. It's one of the most famous projects that I did. It's one of the most fun projects I ever did, but it wasn't nearly enough to support a family. As a test developer at Microsoft, I contributed to Windows and Xbox game audio technologies, Kinect speech recognition system, and the audio hardware for Xbox One. So in about 2007 or so, 2008, I was finishing up that first album that I started working on in 2004. It took me a really long time because I was, busy focused on trying to get a good job and becoming really stable. But once I had that, and I was collecting all these tracks from here, so I came up with the album Shrubbery of Darkness, and that was kind of the album that I always wanted to make. And then I had this idea, like, well, I used to work on Dragon Ball, and I'm starting to see these videos on YouTube of people playing the themes on YouTube. And they're getting a lot of views and a lot of really good comments. And see, now this to me was revolutionary, because when our music originally came out, it was generally panned. Like, people hated it because, or at least the people that we heard talking hated it, because they were generally the older kids on the internet who were familiar with either the Japanese score, because they had, gotten like VHS tapes or real player files and managed to watch the original, or they were used to the Ocean dub in a very, which has its own sound, and they were used to the Ocean actors, and there's a huge reaction to the score and the actors and everything. Like, it was just all hate. So, and it was stated like that for 4 or 5 years maybe. But by 2007 or so, I think at that point, like, some of the younger kids who weren't on the internet when it first came out, they were starting to grow up, and they had a lot of love for this score and for the Funimation actors. And so I was really taken by that, and I was like, okay. And I was still pretty peeved, of course, that I was starting to see my own music put up on the internet. That was another big thing, is I'm starting to see pieces that I had written on YouTube with hundreds of thousands of views, and all these great compliments going to Bruce Faulconer. I can actually record myself building a track real time that sounds exactly like the tracks from the Faulconer's production score. If a girl playing a one-note melody on the piano of one of the themes gets 36,000 views, then what would me playing the original themes on the original synths, how many, what would that do? So I thought, well, this would be a great way to kind of drum up interest in my first album. So that's when I started my YouTube channel, and I started recording videos, and I started work on my second album, which I decided would be a tribute album to the Faulconer score and to my friend Mike, who actually wrote most of the music for the Faulconer score. So yeah, I had what I thought was pretty good success with the kind of Z music push, and I had a nice little run-in with Bruce in 2008 where he threatened to sue me and scared my wife at the time. I had a lawyer send him a response, and there was a little bit of back and forth, and then Bruce didn't do anything. He was trying to say basically that the fact that I wrote music was confidential information, which I am not confidential information. Mike Smith is not confidential information. That's bullshit. Maybe the techniques we use, that could be confidential information, but so that's the reason I don't share like what synthesizers we used or any of that kind of stuff. But who wrote the music? I worked there. I was a member of Faulconer Productions music. This, as I showed in the other video, there's credits for the company under the score. I don't understand what the issue was with there, and so anyway, that whole thing blew over. With the Z Music album, I was able to get the word out a lot about what happened really with the Faulconer Productions score for Dragon Ball, and so I was real happy with that. But I wanted to kind of move on to other styles, and started coming up with a new album. An album that was mostly like big epic orchestral scores, and that was going to have some epic, which I regret that album choice, the name for it now, because the word epic has become so overused. I wish that I hadn't named it that. But anyway, so I got a little frustrated when I was writing that album because like when I was done with it, people mostly cared about the Z-themed tracks on there, which are what there is, Future Sword, Fifth Power, yeah, but there were other tracks on there that I thought were equally as good, but people seem to overlook them, like, you know, the title track or Omega Prime, which are probably my two favorites off that album. And so I started to drop off a little bit after doing that, and then so I started to focus more on work and kind of making myself better as a programmer, since I was pretty sure that's what I was going to do for the rest of my life. So I started, you know, filling gaps that I had in my education, and like with math and more computer science kind of things I'd missed since I was a music major and that kind of deal. So and I got some promotions at work, and that was pretty cool. Yeah. I think the next part is that I had a change of mind. I had a friend of mine who did a video. It was a bass player from Ozzy Osbourne. He had an interview with him, and he was basically saying that you should do whatever the fans love. You should just go for that, and that's really the right thing to do. So I started to think, okay, well, I could do that. There's another huge thing that happened about this time. In 2011, right at the end, my marriage kind of fell apart. I was married in 1998, and my daughter was born in 2002. And yeah, and so into 2011, my marriage kind of all of a sudden going to hell. Or most of 2012 was dealing with either trying to fix the marriage, or then after that, the divorce. So that was really hard. And then, yeah, there's a lot of adjustment. I don't remember what year I uploaded the Soule stuff in, but it was probably after the divorce was kind of settled, and I was starting to kind of get my sanity back, and oh yeah, and I had a big fitness kick, which is kind of why you see more of my face and stuff in the videos, because I'm not ashamed of being fat. So yeah, I had a fitness kick, lost a lot of weight, lost like 30 pounds, and then I started recording music, and decided I would actually act on that thing of like, I should do what the fans want. And so I started going on the forums over at kazinshu.com and asking them what would be good ideas, and we had these. We developed this idea of a progression of cell themes, which I never actually finished. I had one more in the works, which was going to use the electric violin, and then my amp broke, and the whole kind of process that I was going to use to make that track died, and I never finished it. I actually had a whole album I was going to release with that track being the last one to put on it. I should do that. So yeah, so I did some more tracks for you guys, and I started working with, say, an Enigma or Enigma TNG, which is cool stuff. And then in 2014 summer, you may have heard about it in the news, there was a giant layoff, or the start of several giant layoffs at Microsoft, and I was hit by one in like July of 2014, and that was really big for me because I'm having to pay all this alimony to my ex-wife, and I spent 7 months job hunting to something that could pay enough like when you get divorced, your ex, especially if you've been married like 14 years like I was, you have to pay, if you've been supporting your wife like I was because she wasn't working, you have to pay to keep her at the same standard of living that she was before for a certain amount of time. So I had been making, fairly good money at Microsoft as a programmer, and I needed to find another job to be able to continue that. And what I finally landed was a gig in California, which took me away from my daughter, unfortunately. But I wasn't finding anything else because I've been specialized in audio kind of my whole career. So, and that's kind of unusual. Those jobs, especially programming, they're not so common. But the gig I managed to land was really cool. So I got a job working on Call of Duty Black Ops 3. I couldn't tell anybody what it was at the time, but so it was the PS3 and the Xbox 360 versions, and I was the audio programmer. So I started out as the only audio programmer on both of those platforms. I did that for, so I guess I spent about 8 months down in San Mateo or Foster City, California, just south of San Francisco, in a little apartment, paying just crazy amounts of money because it's so expensive to live down there. And then meanwhile also shipping money back to my ex, and then the state taxes. Oh my god, it cost so much money to live there. It's a super fun project. Like, I didn't have a family to take. I would fly up every other weekend to see my daughter, and I would work my tail off on the game, which is really great work. I really enjoyed just digging into a pretty cool game like that. I'm not really a first-person shooter player, but it's fun to be working on, you know, a AAA title and doing that kind of coding. A huge project. It was really interesting stuff. So, but I wanted to get back to Seattle area because that's where my daughter is. In the meantime, my daughter, my ex got remarried, which killed the alimony. Yay! And then she moved south to Olympia, and I managed to land a really cool gig. I'm friends with Jeremy Soule on Facebook. I don't know if you know who Jeremy Soule is, but he wrote the music for like the Guild Wars series and the Elder Scrolls and Harry Potter and all this. He's an awesome composer. He's one of the best. So he started up a company called Roland Virtual Sonics, and he was posting on his Facebook page saying that he needed C++ developers. So I was like, well, that's me. And it's in the Seattle area. I was like, wow, that's perfect. So I applied, or I just sent him a message. Said, hey, I'd be interested in that position if you let me more about it. And make a long story short, I got the job. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm a couple months into my new job, working for Jeremy's company, which is funded by Roland, the electronic music company, make keyboards and stuff. So, which is cool because, you know, I like this drum set. I have a video that features this thing, and I do a lot of my natural drum programming with that. I play it in. That's a Roland piece of gear, and we use some Roland stuff. I think Bruce mentioned it in one of his interviews. That he used a lot of Roland stuff at Faulconer Productions, so very familiar with Roland. And it's cool to be working with Jeremy. I've only actually met him once so far, but yeah, it's a really cool project. I can't really say much about what we're doing. It's all confidential. And oh yeah, and of course in the midst of all this, Battle of Gods has come out, and Dragonball Super, and everybody's, oh my god, you should do music for Dragonball Super. And it would be super, super, super fun to write music for Dragon Ball again, of course. There's a number of problems though. One is that if Bruce's company were to get hired, I'm definitely not going to be involved with that. I don't think they're going to ever hire him again, no matter how many petitions or whatever goes through, but they had a big lawsuit thing going back and forth between Funimation and Faulconer Productions. It's all on the internet. You can search for like Faulconer Music Corporation versus Funimation. You can find all these court dockets and stuff like that. You read about it. There's also a thread on Kazanshu where I kind of posted a whole bunch of links to information. But basically, here they are like suing each other for tens of millions of dollars over a bunch of music that some like recent college graduates wrote for next to nothing. I think it's just ridiculous. That went on for several years, none of which I saw. You know, I just found out about it by looking on the internet and seeing what happened. And then it was settled, mostly out of court. But the actual result of the case was basically that everything was frozen the way it was. Bruce couldn't make any more new albums. They have the copyrights to the music, but Bruce had a license to sell the albums. And they have a license to use the stuff in their existing products. But I think if they add new products with the company's music in it, then they have to pay him additional licensing, I believe, for that. So I don't think they want to do that. And they certainly don't want to hire him to do anything new, especially after what happened. Not only that, besides all the lawsuit stuff, the guy who used to direct the show is Barry Watson, right? That's a kind of an era that's gone. Barry's no longer at that company. And the people who are still there are in the habit of using the Japanese music. And, you know, back then, that whole anime thing was still kind of new, and they felt like it needed to be Americanized. And, you know, like the Japanese soundtracks were kind of sparse, and they felt like they sounded dated, like, you know, kind of old 60s horror music or whatever. Maybe to young people that sounds not as familiar, but to somebody who's older like us, then it sounds like a very old style. So they wanted to update it for the kids. Nowadays, it's just not the practice anymore. And so I don't think that they want to be the weird company that goes out and, you know, hires a composer to, especially when they could just use what's there. Especially when you consider that the Japanese scores are kind of getting more modern sounding. So those are two huge reasons why the scores won't be redone. And then say, even if those issues were overcome and I was offered the job, like, I make a pretty good money as a programmer, and I like writing music just for the fun of it on my own. You know, I might make a dollar here and there on selling online. You know, like, I don't think I'm going to be able to pay for my daughter's college if I was to. I've seen be paid composers for working on a Dragon Ball series. I just can't imagine that working out. I don't know if I'm gonna put this in here, but I'll go ahead and say it. Mike and Julius and I have actually been talking, or at least we were for a while when I was in California. First we were talking about doing like a jam session on video and putting it out. I think it'd be really cool. We were all actually excited, but we all had a bunch of ideas about what to do. And then this interview with a little bit later, like, that kind of fizzled and we didn't do anything because we're all so busy. Hopefully we will at some point. But then that kind of fizzled, and then this interview with Bruce Faulconer comes out. And I think Mike sent out a mail to Julius and myself. It's like, hey, let's get our own interview. And we talked about it. Julius was on board, and I was cool. Okay, if we want to get interview set up, that's cool. But Julius wanted to find like the best interview guy to do it. And I don't know. It kind of, nothing happened there either. But anyway, so maybe at some point there will be an interview or a jam session between the three of us. I think it'd be really cool. We had some ideas for making some really cool, awesome video. So I may start trying to do some more music. I definitely wasn't going to do anything while I was in California because I was in this little tiny apartment with, you know, I hate composing with headphones on. It just doesn't work for me. Every time I write anything, record anything with headphones on, and I play it back over speakers, it sounds terrible. So it wasn't a good situation being in an apartment where I could do music. And plus I was just working my tail off. Here in Olympia, Washington, where I am now, I've got a pretty cool setup where I can kind of record late into the night and play over my speakers, and I don't have quite as intensive work schedule. So yeah, you might start hearing some more music from me, and maybe I'll actually finish that album and put it out. It should have been done like 2 years ago, I think.